Every mystery has an origin, every secret a time and a place. Most of these stories were buried by time, but some they simply refuse to stay forgotten. I'm X, and tonight we're stepping back into the archives to exhume the truth. This is Time with X. The evidence is waiting. Let's begin.
You know what I've never been able to shake? There was a guy I knew growing up. Good man, quiet, the kind of person who showed up early to everything and left late. He coached Little League on Saturdays, made his wife laugh so hard she'd have to put her drink down. You know, that kind of person, the ones you just assume life will be kind to because they were never anything but kind to everybody else. His wife got sick. And I watched this man hold everything together with both hands while everything he loved was being taken from him piece by piece. He never complained, he never asked for anything. He just kept showing up for his kids, for her, every single day until there were no more days left. And I remember thinking after she passed, I don't know how he's going to survive this. Grief like that doesn't knock on the door, it moves in, takes over every room. And the cruelest part, the world doesn't stop, it just keeps going, and you're supposed to keep going with it. Now I want you to hold that image in your mind. A man grieving, trying to rebuild, trying to protect whatever piece he has left for himself and his children. Now I want you to imagine your phone goes off. It's a text, then another, then another. You look down, it's her. Again, you feel that familiar drop in your stomach. That cold, crawling feeling that has no name, but every single one of you watching this right now knows exactly what I'm talking about. That feeling when someone who was supposed to stay out of your life makes it crystal clear they have no intention of doing that. Now imagine in that same thread of messages there are photos. Nude photos. Sent to you unsolicited while you are grieving. And this is not the first time she has done something like this to you. It's not the second time. It's the third. That is the story we are getting into today on Time with X. And I need you to understand something before we go a single step further because I have covered a lot on this channel. We have sat together through cases that made us angry, cases that made us sad, cases that made us question everything we think we know about how this system works. But this one, I watched this hearing 4 times before I could even sit down and write about it. 4 times, not because I didn't understand what happened, but because every time I got to the end, I needed to go back to the beginning just to make sure I had actually heard what I heard. Because what happens in this parole hearing is not just outrageous, it is textbook. It is a masterclass in exactly how someone can sit in front of a board, get caught in lie after lie after lie, 4 lies. We are going to count them together, send nude photos to the man she has been stalking across multiple prison sentences, tell the board she thought it would cheer him up, and walk out with a release date. Here is what I need you to stay for. Because this is not just about her. It's not even just about the board. What we're going to unpack today is something that I think every single person watching needs to understand because it affects all of us. It affects the man in this case who was so terrified of this woman that he didn't even show up to the hearing. Think about that. The victim didn't show up. And I'm going to tell you exactly why and what that silence actually means to someone like her. We are also going to look at the moment, the exact moment one board member almost did the right thing. Almost. And we are going to talk about what the data actually says about cases exactly like this one and why I believe, and I'm going to say it on record right now so you can come back to this video, that we will see this woman again. Not if, when, I'm giving her 30 days, that's my prediction. You can hold me to it. 3 cases, 3 hearings, and I'm telling you now they get worse as we go. So if you are new here, welcome to Time with X. Hit that subscribe button now because you do not want the next one to come across your feed and have no idea who we are or what we do here. And if you have been here, you already know. Let's get into it. Let me paint you a picture. And I need you to pay attention to every single detail here because context is everything in this case. Without it, you might almost feel sympathy. With it, you'll understand exactly why this is one of the most alarming parole decisions I have ever covered. Her name is Porsche Jones Brown. And the connection she had to her victim started the way a lot of these cases start, through someone else's tragedy. You see, Porsche didn't randomly target a stranger. She knew this man. She had a relationship with his world, his family, his life. She was the best friend of his wife, and his wife, this man's partner, the mother of his children, had taken her own life. Let that sit for a second. This man is already carrying one of the heaviest things a human being can carry. His wife is gone. His children are growing up without their mother. He's doing the impossible work of rebuilding a life after a loss that leaves a specific kind of hole, one that doesn't close the way others do. And somewhere in the wreckage of all of that, the woman who was supposed to be his late wife's best friend decided that this man, this grieving man, was hers. That is where this story begins, not in a courtroom, not in a prison cell. It begins in grief, and it is weaponized. Now here's what we know about the timeline, and I want you to follow this carefully because the pattern here is not an accident. This is not a woman who made a mistake. This is a woman with a documented, repeated, escalating pattern of behavior that the system kept slapping on the wrist and sending back out into the world. The first violation: she reaches out to him in a way that is unwanted. He files for a protective order. Now, most people, when someone they know, someone they considered a friend, goes to a court and says legally, "I need you to stay away from me," most people hear that and they stop, they reflect, they move on. Portia Jones Brown is not most people. She violates the order, and then she violates it again. Each time there is a consequence, a court date, a warning, a probation sentence, and each time she reemerges. Because in her mind, according to everything she says in this hearing we are about to break down, she was not doing anything wrong, she wasn't stalking, she was connecting, she wasn't harassing, she was helping. She goes to prison for the first time. Let me repeat that. This is not her first incarceration. She has already served time behind these same walls for these same violations against this same victim. She gets out, and what happens? Her mother dies. And I want to be very careful here because grief is real. Losing a parent is devastating, and I don't want to minimize that for anyone watching who has been through it. But watch how grief becomes a vehicle in this case. Watch how she uses it. Because in her own words, which we will hear, she decided that because her mother had died, she could relate to this man's loss, 2 years after his wife's death by suicide, and that this shared grief was the bridge she needed to reach back out to him. And so she sends him messages, a slew of text messages according to the official record, an email, a phone call, and mixed in with all of that, nude photos. She sends nude photos to the man who has a protective order against her, while he is grieving, while she is on probation, while she knows because she has already served time for this exact type of behavior, exactly what she is doing. Now I want to make sure we are all on the same page about what a protective order actually means. Because I think sometimes in these hearings, in these conversations, we talk about violations like they are technicalities, like someone accidentally sent a text, like someone made an innocent mistake. A protective order is a legal document issued by a court. It exists because a judge looked at the evidence and said, this person poses a credible enough risk to this other person that the law needs to physically stand between them. Violating it is not a technicality. It is a direct, deliberate act of defiance against a court of law and against the safety of another human being. This is the third set of violations. Third. And now she is sitting in front of the Connecticut Board of Pardons and Paroles, serving a sentence of 7 years, suspended after 2.5 with 3 years probation, for 3 counts of violating that standing criminal protective order. She has been incarcerated for 18 months at the time of this hearing. She has an offender accountability plan. She has attended some programs. She has written a letter. And the parole board is going to decide today whether to let her go. The victim is not in the room. He did not submit input. And I am going to explain exactly why that silence is not indifference, it is fear, and it is completely rational. Here is something I need you to understand about stalking behavior before we go any further, because it completely reframes everything you are about to hear in this hearing. Stalking is not about love. I know that sounds obvious, but stay with me. Stalking is about control. It is about a belief system, a deeply held, often unshakable belief that the target belongs to the stalker in some way. That the relationship is real even when it isn't, that the contact is wanted even when it's been legally prohibited. And one of the most disturbing things about cases like this one is that nothing the victim does makes it better. If he shows up to this hearing and says he is terrified of her in her mind, that means he is thinking about her. If he stays silent in her mind, that means he has accepted her. If he files another complaint, that becomes more contact, more engagement, more evidence that the bond is real. He cannot win and he knows it, so he stays home. And the parole board takes his absence as a neutral factor. Now, before we get into the hearing itself, and we are going to go through this thing beat by beat because every minute of it is important, I want you to know what we are looking for. We are counting 4 specific moments where Portia Jones Brown is caught in a direct contradiction. 4 times where what she says to the board does not match what is documented in the official record. 4 times where, if you're paying attention, you can see her recalibrating in real time. 4 lies, we count them together. I've got the timestamps, I've got the receipts, and I've got the reaction of a parole board that, with one exception that genuinely surprised me, seems completely unbothered by any of it. Let's get into the room. Okay, we are in the room. The hearing has begun, and I want you to watch her opening statement very carefully because I'll give her this, it is polished. It is rehearsed. She has clearly worked on it. She uses the right language, she hits the right notes, she talks about dialectical behavioral therapy and coping skills and reframing and trauma groups and all the vocabulary that a parole board wants to hear. And if you didn't know anything about this case, if you walked in cold, you might think, this is someone who has genuinely done the work. But we are not walking in cold, and here is where I need you to start paying attention. The parole officer, the person who interviews these individuals before the hearing, has notes, official notes, and in those notes documented before this hearing is a direct quote from Portia Jones Brown herself. She said she still had unfinished business with the victim. That is what she told the officer, unfinished business, with the man she has a protective order against, with the man she has been to prison for stalking, unfinished business. Now watch what happens when the board asks about it. Board member said, I have a little note that you said you have unfinished business with the victim. Do you recall saying that? And without missing a beat, she reframes it. She says, no, that was taken out of context. What she meant was that at the time she sent the messages, she felt she had unfinished business. Not now, that's not how she feels now, she has moved on. Right. Except, and this is critical, the parole officer documented that statement after already knowing about the violations. After the arrest, after the charges, that note was not from before the crime, that was her explanation for why she committed it. So what she is actually saying when you strip away the soft language is, I still believe I had the right to contact him. I still believe our connection was real enough to justify what I did. I just know I can't say that here. Line number 1 caught moving on. Now here is where it gets almost poetic in how transparent it is. She tells the board that the reason she reached out, the reason for all the texts, the emails, the phone call was grief. Her mother had died. She wanted to share that grief with someone who understood loss. She thought he could relate. She thought his children could relate. She was reaching out in pain, not in obsession. It's actually beautifully constructed, because it takes something that sounds predatory, unwanted contact with a protected victim and repaints it as vulnerability, as a woman in pain reaching out to a friend. Except for one small problem. The board member, and credit where it's due here because one of them actually followed through, asks the follow-up question. And then, but did you also send him nude pictures? And there it is, because if this was purely about grief, if this was a woman in pain reaching out to share sorrow, then why are there nude photographs in the middle of it? Grief-stricken people do not send nude photos to the object of their grief. That is not a coping mechanism that any therapist in the world has ever recommended. And her answer, and I need you to really hear this, is that she was intoxicated, and she thought that's what he might want. She thought the man with the protective order against her, the man she has stalked across multiple prison sentences, the man who has given every legal signal possible that he wants nothing to do with her, she thought that man might want nude photos of her sent to his phone while he was grieving. That is not grief, that is not an apology. That is the belief system of someone who still, at the core of everything, believes this relationship is real. And the board's response? Okay, that makes sense, that makes a lot of sense. I know that was hard to talk about, thank you for explaining that. That makes sense. That makes sense. I genuinely needed to pause the recording when I heard that. I needed to walk away and come back, because what we just witnessed was a parole board member validating, not just accepting, but actively validating the logic of a stalker. And the reason that is so dangerous is not just because of what it says about this hearing. It is because of what it says to her. When you tell someone who operates the way she operates that their reasoning makes sense, you're confirming their worldview. You are giving them the exact signal they have been seeking. Her release plan involves moving in with her father. She tells the board she talks to him all the time. She spoke to him just the night before. She is completely connected, completely supported, everything is arranged and ready. So the board tries to confirm it. Standard procedure, you verify the sponsor before you grant a release. They try to reach the father. They cannot get through. Now the board attributes this to an administrative mix-up. Maybe someone forgot to make the call, maybe there was a scheduling issue, and maybe that's all it is. I can't prove otherwise. But here is what I know, and here's what I want you to hold on to. In case after case after case that I have covered on this channel, when someone claims a release plan that cannot be verified, when the anchor of their stability in the community turns out to be unreachable, it is almost never a coincidence. The people who genuinely have plans have people who pick up the phone, because they know the call is coming, because the plan is real. The board moves past it, they make a note to follow up. They do not treat it as a flag, they treat it as a clerical issue. Line number 3, logged. This one right here is the one that should have ended the hearing. Throughout the hearing, she presents herself as someone who has embraced her mental health treatment fully. She talks about her medication, how she has found the right combination, how it has been transformative, how she understands now that medication is like any other treatment for any other condition. She even makes the comparison: diabetes, high blood pressure, you wouldn't question those medications. Why question these? It is a smart, empathetic, well-rehearsed answer. Except one board member, Miss Keys, who we will get to in a moment, flags something in the assessment file, a report from just 2 months before this hearing, dated March 2026, and that report notes that she was not currently taking her medications, that the facility was actively working with her to get back into compliance. 2 months ago, not taking her medications. Today, in this room, she is telling the board that her relationship with her medication has been transformed, that she is committed, that she understands its importance. 2 months ago, she was refusing it. Today, she is selling the board on how much she values it. That is not progress, that is performance. And the board, they note it. They include medication compliance as a parole condition, and they move on to the vote. 4 lies caught on record in a single hearing. And we haven't even gotten to the deliberation yet. So here we are, the questioning is done, the board has heard everything. They have the file in front of them, they have the parole officer's notes including the unfinished business quote, they have the medication noncompliance report from 2 months ago, they have the fact that her father could not be reached to confirm the release plan, they have the nude photos, they have the context of a third set of violations against the same victim. And now they deliberate. I want to walk you through this deliberation slowly, because the dynamics in that room tell you everything about how these decisions get made, and why the outcomes so often defy logic. The chair of the board goes first, and she is, I want to be fair here, thorough. She acknowledges the programs completed. She notes there have been no disciplinary reports since sentencing for over a year. She references the mental health work, the coping skills groups, the therapy. She talks about Portia's release plan, her stated commitment to NUM meetings, faith-based support, community reintegration. All of that is real, I am not dismissing it. Programs matter, clean records matter, engagement with treatment matters. But here is what the chair does not say. She does not say, and we are troubled by the 4 documented contradictions in this hearing. She does not say, and we are concerned by the medication noncompliance report from 8 weeks ago. She does not say, and we are alarmed that the victim's absence from this hearing is likely rooted in fear rather than indifference. She says she believes Porsche has a good sense that she can have no contact with the victim going forward. Based on what? Based on a woman who, 2 years after being released from prison for stalking this same man, sent him nude photos because she thought that's what he would want. I genuinely need someone to explain that logic to me, because I have watched this deliberation multiple times and I still cannot find the evidentiary thread that leads to confidence. She votes yes, grant parole. Mr. Paul's deliberation is brief. He agrees with the chair. He lists the risk factors as addressed. He cites the clinical assessment moderate range for recidivism, low on the sexual assault conviction behaviors scale, and he says he is in favor. I want to flag something here. The clinical assessment. The risk scoring tools that parole boards use are statistical instruments. They are based on population-level data. They tell you about groups of people, not individuals. And one of the known limitations of these tools, which criminologists and psychologists have written about extensively, is that they can significantly underestimate risk in cases involving obsessive, targeted behavior. Because stalking does not look like general recidivism, it looks like one person, one target, one fixation that does not respond to the same variables. A moderate score on a general risk instrument does not tell you that this woman will leave this man alone. Mr. Paul votes yes, grant parole. And now we get to the moment I genuinely did not see coming. Because if you have watched any amount of content on this channel, you have heard me refer to Miss Keys as the empty suit. That is a name she earned over many hearings, over many votes, over a pattern of going along with the majority regardless of the evidence in front of her. I have been openly critical. I have been frustrated. And I want to be honest with you today, I almost feel the need to revise that assessment. Because Miss Keyes does something in this deliberation that none of her colleagues do. She dissents. And not just quietly, she lays out her reasoning. She references the medication noncompliance from the March 2026 assessment. She acknowledges the disciplinary reports even though they were prior to sentencing. She notes that the offender accountability programs, the specific programs on Portia's official plan, were not completed, and she says she would have wanted more time of stability before granting release. That is a measured, evidence-based dissent. It is not dramatic. It is not punitive. It is exactly what a parole board member is supposed to do: weigh the evidence against the risk and make a judgment call grounded in documentation rather than performance. Ms. Keyes votes no. The vote is 2-1, parole is granted. And the conditions? No alcohol consumption, halfway house placement, mental health treatment with medication compliance, out-of-state plan, and the thing that should never have needed to be said out loud because it was already a legal order: no contact with the victim. They let her go. With conditions, with stipulations, with a parole officer she will have to report to. They let her go. And I want to be very clear about something. This is not just a bad decision for the victim, though it absolutely is that. This is a bad decision for her, because what she's walking out into is not a safety net. The conditions they have placed on her release are exactly the type of conditions she has already violated. Multiple times. She has already demonstrated across multiple incarcerations that conditions and orders and probation terms do not function as deterrents for her. They function as obstacles she works around until she doesn't anymore. The parole board did not grant her freedom today. They started a clock. And I have already told you how long I think it runs. Okay, let's do the work, because I am not going to sit here and just react to a hearing without showing you the full picture. Any decent journalist, any person who takes this stuff seriously has to go to the record, so let's go to the record. What I am about to walk you through is not speculation. This is documented history. This is the paper trail that the parole board had access to, that they looked at, considered, and in 2 out of 3 votes decided was not a disqualifying factor for release. I want you to make that judgment for yourself. 7 years, suspended after 2 years and 6 months, 3 years probation, 3 counts of violation of a standing criminal protective order. That is the official charge structure, but let me translate what that actually means in practice. She was convicted of 3 separate violations of a protective order that was already in place, not one moment of poor judgment, 3 documented, prosecuted violations, and the full 7-year sentence suspended, meaning she does not serve the full time unless she violates again. Which, as we now know, she already has done, repeatedly. The system of suspended sentences is designed to give people a pathway back. That is a legitimate goal. But what it also does in cases like this one is create a revolving door where the consequences keep getting deferred, where the full weight of the sentence is always one violation away but somehow never actually lands. This is not her first time at York Correctional Institution. She was previously incarcerated for the same crime. Let me say that again clearly. She has been in this exact facility for this exact category of offense against this exact victim before. She got out. She violated again. She came back. In the hearing, she actually references her previous incarceration herself, noting that the first time she was there, her behavior was poor enough that she was excluded from programs and opportunities. This time she says she has turned it around, and to her credit, the record at York this time around is genuinely better. No disciplinary reports since sentencing, program participation, consistent job, these things are real. But here is what the evidence also shows. The previous incarceration did not stop the behavior. Whatever insight she developed, whatever tools she gained, whatever changes she made, none of it was enough to prevent her from sending nude photos to the man she was legally prohibited from contacting the moment her mother died, and she felt she had an emotional justification. Personal growth that collapses under emotional pressure is not personal growth, it is performance, and the evidence shows she has already performed this transformation once before. We touched on this in the hearing breakdown, but I want to spend a little more time here because it matters. Mental health treatment and medication compliance are listed as conditions of her parole. The board included them because the record shows they cannot be taken for granted. The March 2026 assessment, 8 weeks before this hearing, flagged noncompliance. The facility was actively working with her on it. Her explanation in the hearing is that she stops taking medication sometimes to make sure her progress is real, to confirm that the changes she is making are her own and not just a side effect of the medication. She wants to know that she is capable without it. I want to engage with that seriously for a moment. Because it is not a completely irrational thought. There is a legitimate psychological concept there about self-efficacy and attribution. Some people do struggle with that question. But here is the problem with it in this specific context. The behavior that landed her in prison, the obsessive contact, the boundary violations, the inability to accept that this man does not want a relationship with her, that behavior is directly connected to her mental health. And the risk of that behavior reemerging is highest precisely in moments of emotional stress. Exactly the moments when, by her own account, she is most likely to decide to stop taking her medication. That is not a safety plan. That is a gap in the fence right at the point where the predator is most likely to come through. Here is something the board noted but did not weight heavily enough in my view. Her offender accountability plan, the official court-mandated list of programs she was supposed to complete, shows significant gaps. She was not able to complete many of the specific OAP programs until very late in her sentence. She is enrolled in New Thoughts as of this hearing, having started it just 2 days prior. 2 days. She started the program 2 days before her parole hearing, and it is being presented as evidence of program engagement, and the board accepts it. Now, I want to be fair, she has done other programs, coping skills, trauma groups, art therapy, Sister Standing Strong. These are real, these are documented, and the board argues reasonably that York offers programs beyond the formal OAP list and that participation in those matters too. But there is a difference between taking the programs that are available and completing the programs that were specifically designed for your case. The OAP is not random. It is a structured plan built around the specific risk factors identified in your assessment. When those programs go uncompleted, it means the specific work that experts determined you needed most, that work has not been done. There is no victim input in this case. The board tried to reach him. The case was continued from the previous month specifically to allow time to contact him. They were unsuccessful, or perhaps, and this is my read, he chose not to engage. I want to explain why that is entirely rational and why the absence of a victim statement should not be interpreted as ambivalence. Stalking research is consistent on this point. Victim engagement with the legal process, showing up to hearings, submitting statements, participating in the system can and does escalate stalking behavior in a significant number of cases, because to the stalker, engagement is contact. The victim talking about them means they are thinking about them. The victim expressing fear means the bond is strong enough to generate emotion. Some victims, particularly those who have lived through multiple cycles of this, as this man has learned that the safest thing they can do is become invisible, make no statement, attend nothing, give nothing that can be incorporated into the obsessive narrative. His silence is not indifference, it is the most rational possible response to the situation he is in. And the parole board, with the best of intentions, I am sure, treats it as a neutral data point rather than what it actually is. Evidence of ongoing fear from a man who has been living under this woman's shadow for years. Here is the full picture: a repeat offender, multiple incarcerations, documented medication noncompliance, an unverified release plan, 4 contradictions in a single hearing, a victim too afraid to appear, and a board in the majority that looks at all of that and says, "She sounds wonderful, let her go." I have shown you everything, now let me tell you what I think happens next. All right, we have done the work. We have sat through the hearing together, we have counted the lies, we have read the record, we have heard the board deliberate and watched 2 out of 3 of them decide that the evidence in front of them was not enough to keep her in. And now, I am going to do something that I do not take lightly on this channel. I am going to make a prediction, on record, in public, with full transparency about my reasoning so you can judge it. I believe Portia Jones Brown will violate her parole within 30 days of release. I am putting 30 days on it, not 6 months, not a year, 30 days. And here is exactly why I believe that. There's a concept in recidivism research called the reentry crisis period. It is the window immediately following release from incarceration when the gap between the institutional structure that has been supporting behavior and the real world is at its widest. During incarceration, a person has routine, supervision, accountability, program engagement, medication management, all the scaffolding that the parole board cited as evidence of change. The moment they walk out, that scaffolding drops away almost entirely. Suddenly they are in the real world with real triggers, real access, and real freedom to make choices without anyone watching. For someone like Porsche, whose behavior is driven by obsessive belief rather than rational calculation, the reentry crisis period is particularly dangerous, because the thing she has been prohibited from acting on for 18 months is still there. We know it is still there. She told the parole officer it was still there. She reframed it in the hearing, but she could not make it disappear from the official record. The first time she feels grief. The first time she feels lonely. The first time something happens that she thinks he should know about. The first time she sees something online that reminds her of his wife or of him, the rationalization engine that has been running in the background of every program and every therapy session and every medication dose is going to produce an output. And that output is going to be, I should reach out. The parole board gave her conditions, but conditions are external. And this particular behavior is driven by something internal, a belief system about a relationship that does not exist, that 18 months of incarceration has not dismantled. I know that a lot of you watching this are going to feel what I felt when I first went through this case. That specific kind of helpless anger that comes from watching a system make a decision that logic and evidence argue clearly against. And I want to acknowledge that feeling because it is valid, it is appropriate, this is infuriating. But I also want to channel it into something useful. Because here is the truth about this channel and why it exists. Every time we cover a case like this one, every time we sit together and go through the evidence and name the patterns and call out the contradictions, we are building something. We are building a body of documented analysis that says we were watching, we paid attention, we named what we saw before it happened. That matters. It matters for the victim in this case who is going home tonight knowing she has been released. It matters for every person who has ever lived under the shadow of someone who cannot accept that no means no. It matters because awareness is not nothing. Awareness is the beginning of everything. So here is what I am asking from you today. First, if this is the first time you have landed on this channel, please subscribe. Right now, before the next case, because the next one and there are two more from this exact same hearing session that we are going to be covering, they are worse. I know I keep saying that. I know that sounds like I'm exaggerating for engagement. I am not. The second case in this session involves a repeat sexual predator who pretended to be 14 years old to gain access to her victim. The third involves a woman who showed up to a home with a knife. And in all three cases, the parole board's response is instructive. Subscribe and you will not miss any of it. Second, share this video, not because I need the numbers, but because the man in this case has no voice right now. The parole board did not hear from him. The system did not protect him today. The one thing that he has, the one resource that the system cannot take from victims and cannot give to stalkers, is public awareness. When more people understand how these cases work, more people recognize the patterns, more people advocate for better policy, better training, better decision-making on boards like this one. That share button is not just an algorithm signal, it is a voice for someone who could not safely use his own today. Let me close with this. Her full-term date, the date by which she would complete her sentence entirely if everything went perfectly, is May 15, 2027, 1 year from the day of this hearing. I am predicting she does not make it 30 days before violating. I want you to timestamp this. Screenshot this, save this, because when we come back to this case, and we will come back to this case, I want the record to show that we saw it coming, that we named it, that we looked at the evidence, did the analysis, understood the psychology, and called it. Leave your own prediction in the comments right now. How long do you give it? 30 days? 3 months? I genuinely want to know what you think because the comment section on this channel is one of the sharpest communities I have ever built, and you see things I sometimes miss. And if you are a professional, a criminologist, a social worker, a law enforcement officer, someone who works with protective orders or stalking cases, I especially want your take. Drop it below, let's build this analysis together. Before we go, I want to say one last thing directly to the victim in this case, on the off chance that somehow, someway, these words reach him. What happened today was not justice. What happened today was a system making a calculation that did not fully account for what you have been through and what you are now facing again, and that is wrong, it is genuinely wrong, and I am sorry. But you are not invisible, what you have lived through is documented, the evidence is on the record, And there are people, a lot of people, as it turns out, who understand exactly what that silence of yours in that hearing room today actually meant. We are watching. All right, that is the first of 3 cases from this session. Hit the like button if this was worth your time. Subscribe if you want to be here when we cover the next 2, and I will see you in the next one.
The evidence is laid bare, yet some questions remain unanswered. What do you think really happened that day? I'd like to hear your theories in the comments below. If you find yourself drawn to the shadows and the stories that history left behind, then you are in the right place. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel so we can continue uncovering the truth together. I'll be here, waiting in the archives when you're ready for the next mystery. Until then, stay curious